sidelines, that's a run to legend status. Ohio State, from the depths of despair to the summit, an all-time story, an all-time Gatorade dump. We'll go deep around the horn.
Tony, was Harry at that game? Can you confirm that?
He was there.
Harry's a member of the Avengers now.
Our first expanded playoff champion, a team that would have been buried in November in that loss to Michigan, but that was then. This is now. How Ohio State came together, grew from that moment, got better, and dominated the playoff. A story Ryan Day says can now be told since they won. I'm all for telling stories even in loss, but wow. Buckeyes 34, Notre Dame 23. The 3rd and 11 ended the game. The perfection of the Buckeyes in the first half was a story in its own. Too much for Notre Dame to overcome. Will Howard, a near-perfect game. Quinshon Judkins, 3 touchdowns. Marcus Freeman was bemoaning Notre Dame mistakes. Was it mistakes, or was it the Buckeyes imposing their will? That's the question I have for you. Harry Lyles Jr., you were there. Around the horn to you.
Tony, this is all about Ohio State being the better team. Notre Dame is a great story, and there are a few plays that you could look at and say that they'd like to have those back. But Ohio State was the standard throughout this playoff, and they proved that. Obviously, you mentioned the near perfection offensively. Will Howard had 13 consecutive completions to start the game. That is a title game record. Jeremiah Smith, the best freshman wide receiver that we have seen in college football history. But to me, the difference between this Ohio State team and previous Ryan Day Ohio State teams was the defense. It's been a 3-year build for them. They brought in Jim Knowles to fix it, and they did exactly that. They were first in total and scoring defense. There have been 5 previous teams to do that and win a national championship since the BCS era started in 1998, and obviously coming into the CFP era. 4 of those 5 teams were coached by Nick Saban. So Ryan Day and his team just accomplished something, not just coming back from that Michigan game, but in terms of their dominance as well that we have not seen in a long time.
I want more on Ryan Day in a second, but I'll turn my attention to you, Woody Page. You heard Marcus Freeman say we made too many mistakes. How'd you see it?
I saw a team that was outrushed 214 to 53 yards. I saw a dominance by the Big Ten, back-to-back national championships, which we haven't seen since the early 1940s, before I was born. We saw a team that just totally went up and down the field in the first half, and I think that there was sort of a laxivity after that allowed Notre Dame to come back in the second half and make it close. However, I just think that Ryan Day, getting all the grief that he has, showed by adding a defensive coordinator, bringing in Chip Kelly, who finally won a national championship in college football. I just believe that the Big Ten, and specifically this year, Ohio State, were the power teams of the entire league and the entire nation, and they did it in an SEC stadium, which has got to feel good for people in the Southeast.
Clinton Yates, around the horn to you.
Tony, this is a situation where 2 things can be true. Ohio State was the better football team, but Notre Dame had opportunities and made mistakes. That first half was dominant. But as the Fighting Irish have done all year, which is regroup and get it together, they did their best in the second half. I didn't have a problem with that fake punt. You needed it. I didn't have a problem with going for the field goal when you were inside the 10-yard line or whatever it was, because it would have changed the psychology of the comeback to being able to win as opposed to being able to tie. But the play that really messed me up was when they got that extra, roughing the passer or whatever it was, when they had Ohio State behind the sticks and you thought, oh man, that was the time when you couldn't have a mistake. And ultimately it didn't add up. Yes, the Buckeyes were more dominant all season and in the playoffs, but Freeman has nothing to not be proud about regarding how they managed to do what they did, which was show their mettle as a team. I thought it was exactly what the game should have been, considering what the scouting report was.
Frank Isola, around the horn to you.
Yeah. Welcome back, Clinton. And Woody, you look great. Forget about college football. You should be talking about German foosball with the way that you look. As for that game last night, you had Riley Leonard. They're winning 7-0, and you're thinking, well, Notre Dame's in good shape. Meanwhile, Riley Leonard's vomiting on the sideline. He looked beaten up on the first drive. Next thing you know, you look up, they're down 31-7, and it felt like the game was over. Let's think about what Ohio State did here. In the playoffs, they won by a combined 70 points. They beat their opponents by double digits in every game, and that doesn't include beating Indiana by 23, during the regular season and winning at Penn State. It has the best roster in the sport, and I mean this as a term of endearment. They're a football factory. They churn out professional players. They got athletes on both sides of the ball. Not surprised at all by what happened in this tournament or last night.
What this title means for Ryan Day is an interesting question that I want to get your take on now, Harry Lyles Jr. Because I had people on this panel say he was headed towards a firing with that Michigan loss. Some said he needed a deep run. One even said he could win the championship and still get let go. Come on now, a mute for the panel just for somebody saying that. But what did Day just do, Harry Lyles Jr., and how did you hear it from him on site last night?
I mean, to me, this is just the ultimate turnaround, and I feel pretty good for him because the whole thing with his hot seat and how out of hand that got was absurd. Like, we had people parachuting in that clearly don't watch college football calling for this guy's job when, honestly, outside of the Michigan rivalry, yes, he is one of the best coaches in Ohio State history. And even if we go back to not this year's loss, but the prior year's loss to Michigan, was there any shame in losing to the 15-0 national champions? I understand this year's loss was very bad, but you also have to give this man credit for turning it around and being as dominant as they were after that, because a lot of coaches and teams, I think, probably would have flopped after that. So I think you have to give him credit for that turnaround.
Woody Page?
Absolutely. One team, as he said, doesn't make a program. And when you come back and you beat Oregon after you lost, they only had one bad game all year, and that was against Michigan. That Oregon game previously could have gone either way. They beat Tennessee. They beat Texas. They beat Notre Dame. You beat 4 major programs around the country. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You have nothing to think about firing him. Think about lambasting him. Not at all. He has done an exceptional job there. Maybe, as Harry says, he has a personality conflict. Maybe he needs to go out and learn to be more fun about it. But Ohio State fans are no different than most fans around the country, that if they don't get exactly what they want to get rid of the coach. But there's a guy that maybe should get a 10-year contract now as a result of this.
Clinton Yates, around the horn to you.
I don't know about that, Woody. Ohio State fans are on a different echelon when it comes to ridiculousness, and I think that Ryan Day's circumstance is exactly emblematic of that. That being said, I agree with you. The personality element is huge here. When you're going after 85-year-old guys like Lou Holtz over the toughness of your team, and then you're out there complaining about how the refs are going to be from the SEC, and you've got proof to prove it, that's the kind of thing that turns people off. That said, the numbers speak for themselves. If what you're concerned about is winning football games, Ryan Day does what he does. But in college football, personality matters. Just look around the country, and that's where I think there still might be something to be desired, but there's no world in which I'm going to say that he deserves to lose the Buckeyes job because he lost a couple random games to Michigan at any
Frank
stage. Not
Isola.
even close.
Well, this is the kind of personality he has. To Harry's point, people are calling for his head. Then his son revealed after last night that after that loss to Michigan, he was receiving death threats. What happens to Ohio State? They rattle off 4 wins by double digits. I'm happy for Ryan Day. And what cracks me up in this world where nobody ever cares about the regular season, somehow we're only supposed to care about this Ohio State-Michigan game. I get it. I love that game. I understand how big it is. But anybody outside of the state of Michigan, Ohio, you ask them, would you rather win that game or win the national championship? He won the job he was supposed to do. They show up in the summer, and they had one bad day, as Woody pointed out. They lost to Michigan. It happens. But he did what he was supposed to do. He won a national championship. Good for him.
I think that team would run through a wall for that coach. One more story here. The expanded playoff, whether you prefer this system or the old, that's one question, I guess. But did it all work? The committee hasn't ruled out tweaks for next year, but did it work this year? Harry Lyles Jr., around the horn to you.
It worked, but it can be better. I think that the emphasis on conference champions and then automatically giving them a bye is not as relevant in a 12-team format because we're not having issues getting teams in and trying to decide who's better or not. I think you rank the teams, you seed them based off of that ranking because that's the whole purpose of doing it in the first place. The conference champion weighted matter does not, it's not as big of a factor in a 12-team playoff, in my opinion.
Everybody's going to want a tweak. I want a major change. I want football in college to start in August and finish on January 1st, where it's supposed to be. I mean, it was hidden almost in the National Football League playoffs last night. That's the change I want to see.
Glenn Yates?
Woody wants week sub-zero, not week 0, but I don't have a problem with the conference champion situation as long as you get rid of the actual championship games. The tweak I want to see is for the second round games to actually be home games. You should get an advantage for playing well enough to get that bye. That makes sense to me.
Frank Isola.
Yeah, I like everybody getting a home game, but I agree with Harry. Forever we've been doing college ranking. Now all of a sudden we're going to give somebody an automatic seed just because they won the conference? That's ridiculous. And I think that led to a lot of these lopsided games early on.
If you make that one little tweak, can we get to a place where we can have both the regular season that we feel is the greatest regular season in sports, and then a playoff which we know can be exciting, right? You can have both worlds.
Yeah.
The greatest regular season.
At some point, you got to
postseason.
play the games, man.
Taking a break. Buy or sell next.
Welcome back to Around the Horn, coming to you from the Heineken River Deck at Pier 17.
Ben Johnson and the Bears. But did they interview enough candidates? The offensive genius, mad scientist, architect of #1 offense in the league gets his first head coaching job and tries on a franchise in perpetual rake-stepping mode when it comes to offense. He also gets Caleb Williams, and Williams gets Johnson. Clinton, is Ben Johnson the best coach for the Bears? Around the horn to you.
I think he's a good hire. It's a better situation now that Caleb Williams actually has him as opposed to being pranked by fans and showing his love for it. But that game against the Commanders would have given me a little bit of a pause in terms of how they managed that bad boy. I'm not saying that that's going to bleed over into the Chicago situation, but just looking at that from the outside, did not love that. I hope it goes better.
So one playoff loss where they did score some points on the board was enough for you to maybe cool on Ben Johnson?
But the way it went, Tony, it's not just results based. Didn't like how it
Woody
actually
Page
proceeded
around the horn to
personally,
you.
But I'm not a football coach.
Absolutely. It's the best choice they could have made after interviewing 17 guys. I thought they were about down to calling me one day to come into Chicago and interview for the job. But given the situation that he's played against the Vikings, he's played against the Packers, he's played against the Bears, he knows the other teams. He was with Detroit. He knows the division better than anybody. And the quarterback, Caleb, had said during the course of the season that he loved he studied his schemes offensively. So he's got to like it. And I think the Chicago Bears have made the right choice of a guy that knows the division, knows the team.
You're really drilling down on knowing the division. Okay. Harry Lyles Jr., how about you?
Whether he's the right choice or not, I think that we'll find out. It's certainly somebody I'm willing to roll the dice on. We're talking about a guy that made the Detroit Lions the most exciting offense in the NFL this year. And they've been top 5 each of the 3 years that he has been their offensive coordinator. He's also one of the more creative play callers in all of the NFL as well, with pre-snap motion and play action as well. They've been top 5 in both of those categories every year since he's been the offensive coordinator. So yes, this is a good choice. Give Caleb Williams some consistency and a bright mind. He'll be just fine.
He also had Jared Goff, a quarterback that had gone to a Super Bowl with a different team before. I think a safer pick would have been Mike McCarthy from this standpoint. He was in Green Bay. Look at the job he did there, the job that he did in Dallas. They're trying to replicate what Washington has. Let's remember, Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, both former NFL coaches. I hope it works out for Ben Johnson. I would have gone with the more
You would have. Now, are you with Clinton that the loss this past weekend takes off some of the shine?
I would suggest on a key possession in a home playoff game, do not have your wide receiver throw the ball. Leave it in the hands of your
Creative play calling.
The shine is
Creative
off.
play calling. What
Like
happened to
losing
that?
to Michigan all over
That's
again.
your hometown team, Clinton, of your youth, Washington, who employ a head coach who was a coordinator the year before. And what did that head coach do in their last playoff game as a coordinator? They let up 48 points, Dan Quinn did, to the Green Bay Packers. We'll move on. Baltimore Ravens exit interview had 2 divergent headlines. One, it's inevitable. That was Patrick McCarthy about Lamar Jackson winning a Super Bowl. The other, this team is done. Marlon Humphrey talking about how some guys will stay, some guys will go next year. Frank Isola, how do you hear it all?
I don't like that word inevitable. Dan Marino and Dan Fouts never won a Super Bowl, and they made it to a game there. Is he good enough? Absolutely. Inevitable? I'm not so sure about that. Remember one thing about Lamar Jackson. The biggest thing is in these playoff games, turning the ball over. He's been in 8 playoff games, turned the ball over 11 times. That's what he has to cut down on.
Harry Lyles Jr.
I'll go inevitable. There have been 6 players in NFL history that have won 3 MVPs, and each one of them has at least 1 Super Bowl. In the case of Jim Brown, he has an NFL championship. Lamar Jackson showed us this year he is still getting better. 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions during the regular season, and also 900 rushing yards. I think that guy, that franchise, and that coach can figure out how to win a Super Bowl before he's done.
It's going to happen. He should reach out to John Elway, though. He played into his 15th season without winning a Super Bowl after suffering through 3 blowouts in Super Bowls. So it will happen at some point. John Elway then won back-to-back Super Bowls. So I think Lamar can do it too.
Elway was making the Super Bowl. Jackson is yet to do that. Clinton Yates, around the horn to you.
I talk to a baby all day, and the scoring system makes less sense than he does today, but that's another matter. What I'm saying is, inevitable is not the word I would use. Lamar Jackson's not even 30 years old, man. Give this guy a little run. He's obviously great. Inevitable is way too strong of a word to use in this scenario. Just ask Woody's other guy, Peyton Manning, who managed to do it then.
Yeah, so wait, you didn't like the Dan Quinn? Dan Quinn, in his last game as a coordinator, right? Led up 48 points in a playoff loss that the Cowboys were at home, and then he went on to be a head coach and has coached very well this season. You would agree, right?
I don't disagree, but he's also got the best rookie quarterback in the history of the game, which Caleb Williams is not yet. So.
Take it easy.
But you were talking about
that.
the shine off of a playoff loss, and the playoff loss happened as well. You're going the wrong way, Clint Yates.
Nothing wrong with that.
Lyle, Isola, showdown next. Celtics 125, Golden State 85 last night in San Francisco. It was the worst home loss in the Steve Kerr era. They are 9-18 since that hot start they had. Harry, have they hit rock bottom, or is there still bottom to rock?
I think there's more bottom to rock. I mean, look, Golden State had important guys that didn't play in this game. Draymond Green, Brandon Podziemski, Kyle Anderson did not play. John Kuminga did not play. So, they lost by 40 to the defending champs. But when your guys are on the floor, I think even a 20-point loss with your guys would be worse.
Nice.
Yeah, they joined the 40-40 club. Lost by 40, worst home loss in 40 years. This team was 12-3, but when you talk about rock bottom, they've already lost by 51 to Memphis. It's going to keep getting worse. Whether it gets 40
So you both agree?
Lost, not so sure about that.
Wow, we'll split the point then.
They arrived there already.
Sometimes I rock bottom, sometimes I bottom rock. We'll move on. Baseball Hall of Fame announcements. T-minus 33 minutes. Ichiro, CC Sabathia, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Carlos Beltran, Felix Hernandez, Dustin Pedroia. Just some of the names. Frank, who do you have your eye on?
You mentioned the name, but for me, one sticks out, and that's Ichiro. What a brilliant player as a hitter and also in the field. Remember, if you add his 1,200 hits from the Japan League, which I know they don't, he has more hits than Pete Rose did. So Ichiro, what a
Well,
fun
let me ask
player
you a
he
follow-up.
was
Is
in every
that
sense of the
unanimous
word.
then, Frank Isola, for you?
It better be, but our boy Derek Jeter wasn't unanimous. Remember that.
Harry Lyles Jr., how about you?
Frank, Ichiro's going to be all right, man. Another year on the show, me saying Andrew Jones needs to be in the Hall of Fame, the best defensive center fielder there ever was. Usually a WAR of 60 is a pretty safe zone for you to get in the Hall of Fame. His is 67.2. 10 Gold Gloves, 434 home runs on those Braves teams from the 90s. Put him in the Hall.
There it is. That was the argument I wanted to hear. I believe Ichiro is unanimous.
Albert Bell.
But I'm with Harry for Andrew Jones. Australian Open
Albert
quarterfinals. Djokovic Alcaraz, another classic. 3.5 hours. Went to 1 a.m. Another Djokovic win. On to the semis, where he has been once before. Australian Open quarterfinals. Coco Gauff, Paula Badosa pulling off the upset. Gauff's hot streak to start the year is now over. Harry, what's the bigger story?
Tony, it's all about Carlos Alcaraz not being able to beat Novak Djokovic. This is now 4 out of 5 times that Djokovic has gotten the best of him, which is impressive at 37 years old, but I am firmly in the belief that Carlos Alcaraz should be the baby GOAT, and you got to start converting some of these, man, if you're going to be that.
Nice.
Coco Gauff had been on a run. That's a bad loss for her. But come on, Djokovic is 37 years old. He's not supposed to be at the top of his game the way that he is. He already took care of Nadal and Federer. Now he's taking care of the young guy.
It did seem like Alcaraz was going to take it from, and it hasn't happened the last few meetings.
Nope.
Now we get to see Djokovic in the semis. He's never been there before. I mean, we'll move on. Frank, Showdown 4.
Jay, you deserve it, brother. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh.
You blame cart, you blame driver, you blame hallway for this mishap with Ryan Day and Will Howard aboard last night.
Life imitates art. I remember this happened in an Austin Powers movie. This is exactly what it looks like. You know what the problem was? Pedal to the metal. She's going too fast. Slow down. But you're a little nervous. You have the champions in the car. I get it. Got to go a little slow.
Harry?
As the only panelist that was in those tunnels last night, let me tell you something. By the time the game ended, it was 20 degrees out there. We got to find a way to get some heat out there, Mr. Blank. So, look, I think it was so cold she just couldn't think, and that's why you saw that user. Some people just can't play in the elements, man.
You're blaming the temperature in the tunnels?
Yeah.
He blamed
Yes.
the weather.
It's not the cold, it's the humidity. Frank Isola, take the FaceTime.
Could say the stupidity. All right. We do have a Willy Wonka situation in baseball. An 11-year-old in California has ended up with a rare Paul Skeens card. That's the Rookie of the Year. The card is autographed and it has a game-worn patch. The Pittsburgh Pirates want to get it back. They're offering the kid 2 seats behind home plate for 30 years. Also, Paul Skeens' significant other, Livy Dunn, is saying you can hang out with me in a suite. That's an appealing offer. But kid, do not take financial advice from me, but in this case, take financial advice. Hold on to the card. It'll be worth more than $1 million. Keep the card. And congrats.
See you tomorrow
Marston
around the
Charles
horn.
Sabathia Jr.